Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, April 15th, 2019, and that makes it tax day among people who are concerned about such things. And you should all be concerned about taxes, of course. This year we have a very special episode of Tax Day in which it is alleged by the White House and others that everybody got a tax cut. You just didn't know it, and so how do you feel about that? It's fun to get a tax cut, but you have to realize it in order to have that fun. I don't know, maybe you didn't. Maybe you've done apples to apples comparison and found that it's not the case, but the newspaper said the opposite, so you're going to have to go with that. And today is the day for ritual whining by Republicans about how miserable it is to pay taxes and be a part of a larger society, even though they don't pay those taxes. And we're all supposed to just endure that, I guess. But less antics so far this year. Maybe a muted response because we are awaiting the release of some redacted version of the Mueller report. Maybe it's Game of Thrones that has you distracted. That has been the other, I guess, recreation. The other major topic on Twitter of the day is who did and did not watch the new Game of Thrones, who never watches Game of Thrones, who usually watches Game of Thrones and really wanted to watch Game of Thrones but only had a T-vote and insisted that everybody stop talking about Game of Thrones until they got to watch it, or whatever. Or various other memes comparing contemporary politics to Game of Thrones, which is entirely possible to do. Minus the dragons part, of course, although I guess there are certainly certain things which are equally mythical, but in which a certain segment of the population strongly believe. But first we have to get past there's a mix of self-pitying and self-congratulatory tweets about people who don't watch Game of Thrones. I've never really understood that entirely. I think it's a relatively good show, but I mean, there's a lot of television out there. There's a lot of television that people don't watch. They like other television shows. I get it. It's okay. And sometimes you feel like you're the only one in America, or the world for that matter, who doesn't watch the show. And by the way, if you're looking for some really good entertainment, I do have a suggestion for you. Go on to Twitter, and maybe you're the only person in the world that doesn't use Twitter. So then that would really be cool. You should sign up and say, I only signed up for Twitter. I'm the only person in the world that doesn't use Twitter. I only signed up for it to come here to tell you I'm the only person in the world that doesn't watch Game of Thrones. But if you're looking for some entertainment, this is a nice payoff. Go on to Twitter and search, in quotes, only person, and then in a separate set of quotes, single episode, and then Game of Thrones, and just marvel at the number of people who literally tweet, I must be the only person in the world, in America, that I know, what have you, who's never seen a single episode of Game of Thrones. And you'd think that, I don't know, hopefully Twitter's algorithm throws some of those people together so that they can form an affinity group and have something in common to talk about. They all obviously find it very interesting that they don't watch this show. I'd be, I guess, more interested in, do you watch a show and what do you like about that show? But I got a bunch of tweets instead about what they don't watch and why they don't watch it, including I work 2 jobs and I don't have any time. Okay, that's actually interesting. Tell me about the jobs. Tell me about what you do, I guess. I've said it a few times, what I don't watch. Although I don't tend to make it a topic of conversation unless somebody wants to. Did you see such and such last night? No, I didn't. I actually don't watch that show. Oh, you should. Yeah. I should. Sometimes I catch up with them. I watched The Wire years after it was over. That was nice. Some other ones too. I don't know. I find that particular show interesting, and other shows not so much. And but I always find it interesting to see why. I guess to a certain extent, why people don't watch one that I watch too. Sure, that's better topic of conversation. The reasons they don't watch it, and I have occasionally said I don't watch the Sunday morning talk shows, but nobody has ever asked me to explain that. And I feel like I've never had to. Anyway, we can roll on with the other topics of the day. And as a matter of fact, we're anxious to get to them. Bill tells us from Portland, Maine, in case you haven't noticed, Daily Kos Radio is live now. And Kagro X, me, David Waldman, welcomes you to America's one and only sanctuary radio show. Try the Dip, it's fabulous. The Dip is the president of the United States. He does believe he's fabulous. Greg Dworkin joins us from Florida, I believe, today. You're retired now. And
next week.
Oh, okay. I thought that was this week. Dang. Okay.
No, well, what happened is this is my last week.
Oops, I blew the surprise.
We had incredibly big rainstorms, so I think maybe we did wash to Florida. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
I haven't
so
been
you're
out of the house
eventually
yet to see what's here and what's not here.
Right. Well, it's the two animals of every kind. That's the real hint. So watch out for that.
I know. That's what bothered me. I looked out the window and I saw two of everything going by.
So you keep it extra.
And then I saw this witch on a bicycle. Oh, my gosh.
Really?
We're in trouble.
All these storm-related iconography that you
I don't think we're in Kansas anymore.
I doubt that you were. But, you could have landed anyway.
An elephant to the other elephant. So I sent you this piece from the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
Game of Thrones madness is starting again. Pity the non-watchers. There's quite a number of people in my timeline that don't watch, including me.
Yeah.
And it's like Sharknado when you're not watching, or football when you're not watching, and you're trying to figure out what's going on in the news, and you use Twitter for that, and everybody that you know that's in your timeline is watching this thing that you're not watching, and you're scratching your head and say, okay, well, maybe I should go do something else.
Yeah. Or watch it, I guess, is a thing to do.
No.
I don't know. No. I've done it a couple of times where I've said, all right, well, what is this thing? Oh, yeah, look at that. I don't think I've ever said, now I'm going to do it too, but I've certainly said, okay, I see what they're talking about.
Well, it's good to know basic themes,
it becomes a cultural
the betrayal,
thing.
dragons, walls of ice, zombies. Right. I mean, fine. Done.
Yes. Oh, everybody loves zombies.
Yeah.
You got to watch every zombie show.
That's a different thing.
Yeah. That Walking Dead is the one that a lot of times people will tweet about, and I say, yeah, I haven't seen that one. Well, why? You watch the other zombie show. Well, how many do you need? They're dead and they're walking.
Right. There's plenty of that in politics as it is.
Right.
So, the world is going crazy.
Yes.
As you know. Oh, also, Tiger Woods won the Masters.
Yes, right. Speaking of zombies.
He's still not a very nice person, but, he worked hard and won after many years and some back surgery.
He's sort of icon as well.
He earned his win. Good for him.
I was somewhat pleased to have heard that
Phil Mickelson isn't a very nice person either.
No. But I admire their golfing abilities.
And he's left-handed, so, fine.
He is not. He golfs lefty.
Oh, really?
He is not left-handed. That makes him interesting. He learned to play golf like in the mirror, essentially. He was mirroring his dad's golf swing and didn't realize that he was swinging lefty. And I think his dad thought it was a good idea. But I learned that about him, and then that's it for things to say about Phil Mickelson.
Okay,
very good golfer.
Yeah, anyway.
That's it.
So, just noted.
Yeah.
All right.
He didn't win.
Let's see. The thing that was really striking me, though, is, as you know, your listeners have been kept up to date, annoyingly or not, by me, about what's happening with Brexit.
Yes. I think everyone has been enjoying figuring it out with you.
Right. So here we go with The Guardian. Tories, that's the Conservative Party, hit by new defections and slump in opinion polls as party divide widens. Ex-cabinet minister Stephen Dorrell announces switch to the Change UK party. So the Change UK party, for those of you following along with your scorecards, is the refuge for non-Brexit conservatives to run to. Conservatives fall to a 5-year polling low, and the bitter fallout from Brexit is threatening to break the Tory party apart, as a Europhile former cabinet minister, Stephen Dorrell, on Sunday announces he's defecting to the independent MPs group, Change UK. And a new opinion poll shows conservative support plummeting to a 5-year low as anti-EU parties surge.
Well,
so what's happening is that the smaller populist parties are gaining strength. And so basically you have a bunch of Brexiteers who are telling, remember, this is the House Freedom Caucus section of the Conservative Party, telling the Prime Minister, we don't like anything you're doing, you're making too many concessions. And some conservatives who like the European Union or like the idea of not screwing up the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland and want to stay within the Commons are leaving the party, and others who don't think that the Conservatives are conservative enough are also leaving the party.
Yeah, everybody should leave. It's interesting how flexible party ID is there because of their parliamentary system. Makes sense.
Arguing that neither the Conservatives nor Labour, they spell Labour wrong, I always notice that. They must be from Canada, now represent mainstream opinion in the UK. Dorrell says that the current two-party system no longer serves the interests of the electorate. He writes, I shall continue to describe myself, as I always have, as a liberal conservative. Well, there's your problem right there. But I shall do so in future as a supporter of Change UK, the independent group, which I believe has become the natural home of those who regard themselves as I do as the heirs of Disraeli, Churchill, Macmillan, and Heath.
Beautiful.
What do Heath bars have to do with anything?
I don't know.
He adds, I do not believe any of them would have countenanced the idea that Britain should imagine its interests are best served by removing itself in the European mainstream.
So never Trumpers in England are Change UK-ers.
Yeah, now the Change UK-ers, there's European elections, which right now UK is going to participate in, which annoys the Brexiteers. So he may stand for that. And then in a further sign that the Conservatives would face a split if May were replaced as a leader by a hardline pro-Brexit leader, the Observer has also obtained a recording of Kenneth Clarke, the former Chancellor, telling students at Nottingham University earlier this month that while he believes that leaving the Tory party now would be an odd gesture, he would probably switch to Change UK if May's successor was a hardline Brexiteer who appointed a cabinet full of anti-EU Tories.
Okay.
And that's the threat. In other words, May has made a pig's breakfast of everything, and so they may throw her out, replace her with somebody like Nigel Farage or somebody else directly out of Monty Python, and and then everybody else walks.
Okay. Right.
I just it's an important ally. And really, really worth paying attention to, which is why we spend so much time on it. Yeah. The latest defections come as a new opinium poll, OPINIUM, a new opinion poll.
I see. Is that a brand name?
Opinion poll for the Observer shows a dramatic fall in Tory support in the past 2 weeks in a surge for anti-EU parties. The Conservatives have fallen by 6 percentage points to 29%. Labour's at 36%.
Okay.
UKIP, which is a hard right party, up 2 points on 11. Even more alarmingly for the Tories, the prospects for the European elections appear dire. Only 17% of those certain to vote said they would choose the Conservatives in the European poll. So in other words, representing the UK in the European Parliament will be non-Brexiteers.
Yeah. Which
will make the Brexiteers really mad.
Right. That's funny because they'll want to boycott the whole thing. We don't want to even participate in this election because blah, blah, blah. And then the whole MEP contingent from UK will be Remainers. That's interesting.
Which party would you remain for in the European Parliament? Which party will you vote for in the European Parliament elections? Labour 29, Conservative 17, UKIP 13, the Brexit Party 12.
Okay, well,
isn't that a movie with like Molly Ringwald or something?
The Brexit Club. Yeah, that would be a good idea.
Should be separately, polling expert and Conservative peer Robert Hayward said the Tories were likely to lose more seats than other parties in the local council elections on May 3rd, partly because they had performed strongly when the same seats were last up for election and the Liberal Democrat vote collapsed. Hayward said the Lib Dems were likely to be the biggest gainers, while Labour, which had fared poorly in recent council by-elections, might do less well than its supporters hoped. Well, but the point is that the Tories would do poorly. And where that support goes remains to be seen. But they're still in a mess, and I just thought I'd let you know.
Yeah.
Now, other big stories, of course, one big story we don't have yet that we're waiting for is this is the week that the Mueller report's supposed to come out, at least the Bowdlerized version of it.
Okay.
The Barlerized version of the Mueller report's supposed to come out. And even the redacted version is rumored to not be so good for Trump, but we'll see. And one thing that has happening is, of course, Trump is tweeting about Ilhan Omar
Yeah.
She says this is endangering lives. It has to stop. Mm-hmm. And Nancy Pelosi has said that she's already spoken to Capitol Police about protection for her. So we have a New York Times story in attacking Ilhan Omar. Trump revives this familiar refrain against Muslims. What he's trying to do is make it politically unacceptable for Muslims to be in politics.
Yes.
Essentially, is what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he likes it, and his rabid base, rabid as in rabies, as in like they're nuts.
Oh, I thought they
really
rabbits.
Are very into this. And of course, this is one of those. Oh, well, this is going to be good for his base. Trump has done something really terrible and horrible and obnoxious and awful. What are Democrats doing about it? Actually, that's really not the story. The story is that the Republicans are doing this, and so we'll see how this plays.
Yeah.
Now, remember, when it comes to politics, reporters only cover this as politics, as horse race.
Yes, okay.
Trump shot 97 people. How fierce is the Democrat response going to be?
Right. How many of them were registered?
Because they hold a danger that they might have a split response to this and not be as strong as we think they should be.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now is not the time to push back on the murder.
Well, folks, the story is like what he did, not how people respond to it. No. We have to do a both sides thing.
Yeah.
Well, no, the problem is what he did, not how people respond to it. This is not hard. How many times do we have to explain this? So, we'll see how that plays out. And people on the Democratic side, and especially on the progressive side, were kind of annoyed that Pelosi didn't jump in and play that game. And the fact of the matter is that it's about Trump. It's not about Omar.
Well, yes. Well, I had difficulty with that myself, looking at the New York Times piece. I guess they illustrated it with a photo of Ilhan Omar in silhouette speaking to a crowd, and the only thing my brain could do was try and process that silhouette to see, how is that Donald Trump? It doesn't even really look like him. It's ridiculous looking, but I don't see how that's Trump unless that's somebody wearing the Trump University mascot suit. Then I understand it. And, of course, it turned out to be Ilhan Omar, who's, central to the story. But I have my own problems pounding these stories into the mental constructs I already have, which is a problem. I have to come here and stretch them out.
So, I think, again, there's other things more important going on. And when the Mueller report comes out this week, I think, it's one of the things we have to pay attention to.
I would think so. There's going to be an awful fight
Game of
when
Thrones,
that happens. Yes, right. That changes everything. And that's the meme we'll have to make about the Mueller report when it comes out.
Right. More on the Mueller report. This is a nice piece by David Leonhardt in the New York Times. Mueller and the media, take two. Let's try to do better this time. Right?
Okay.
On the recent episode of the Argument podcast, I told my colleague Ross Douthat, one of the problems with working with the New York Times is you have to talk to your colleague Ross Douthat, that I thought he was unfairly lumping together different parts of the media when criticizing the coverage of the Russia investigation. And that is fair. Because what cable does and what the written word does are very different. The people who are in the White House Correspondents Association who follow closely in print are different than speculative evening cable. I mean, the media is a very broad category that really doesn't cover everything. Yes, cable television engaged in wild speculation before Robert Mueller issued his report, says Leonhardt. And yes, some news outlets, including BuzzFeed and McClatchy, published stories that today look dubious. I'm not sure, because we haven't seen the report yet. But the newsrooms covering the investigations most closely, including the Times and the Washington Post, generally did an excellent job distinguishing among fact, uncertainty, and falsehood. The Times was the one that had the Trump exonerated headline, so no. The Seattle Times had a much better one. It was Barr, no collusion, no exoneration. 5 words, covered everything. It was Barr that said it, and it was not collusion, and it was no exoneration. So that was a very good headline. The Times didn't do so well.
Yeah.
I think the coverage at the end of the Mueller investigation was different, however. Across the media spectrum, much of the coverage was problematic. To review, Mueller's written a report that very few people have seen. Its only official public description has come from William Barr, the Attorney General whom President Trump appointed primarily because of Barr's hostility to the investigation. And the difference between Barr's letter and Mueller's report has created widespread confusion. The press, to put it mildly, has not handled the confusion well. This is from Lawfare.
That's true.
The media dramatically overstated what Barr had actually said about the report and also incorrectly suggested Trump had been cleared of wrongdoing. The coverage also underplayed Barr's bias.
Yes.
That's true. That's
Right.
all of that. In their article, Jurisic and Witties offer, that's the Armando bat signal, offer signal pieces of advice for anybody who will be covering or trying to understand the fuller version of the Mueller report once it's made public. Barr has said he will release a redacted version early next week, meaning this week. Among the article's advice, focus on what the report actually says. Pay more attention to the details of the report than to the reactions from Congress, the White House, and elsewhere. Right, and that's what I was saying before. If you do something, then what you do matters. Your reaction to it is secondary. Be careful not to confuse the judgment about whether certain conduct is prosecutable with a judgment about whether it happened. Right? If somebody does something but you can't send them to jail for it, that thing still happened. Could be reprehensible but not illegal.
Right.
Remember that and maybe the laws need to be changed. Remember that some behavior that is not prosecutable can still be wrong or damaging to national security. Don't assume that all redactions are inappropriate. I mean, sometimes grand jury stuff is okay to blank out. But if he's trying to protect Ivanka, that's a different story. Be open to the possibility of multiple complicated storylines. Well, hello.
That sounds pretty good.
Following this for 2 years. What do you think this is, Game of Thrones?
Hey,
which I don't
that's
watch.
about multiple complicated stories. All right.
All right. Anyway.
You would know that if... All right. Sorry.
I don't watch Veep either. All of this strikes me as good advice. Related, James Fallows of The Atlantic says the Seattle Times did a much better job putting the Barr letter in context, and they did. While USA Today said no conspiracy as their headline, the Seattle Times said Barr, no collusion, no exoneration. The Seattle Times got it right. USA Today got it wrong.
Yeah. It was a great strategic guess on behalf of the White House to think that they could inject a completely opposite counter narrative simply by issuing a letter and putting that out there as the only thing that there was available to the press. In hindsight, it seems pretty obvious, but it makes me think a lot about the network reporters racing to the cameras to tell us what happened in a Supreme Court decision that they haven't read yet. And they run and somebody blurts out, the first one to blurt out what the ruling means, even if they're wrong, gets the prize, and then everybody else says the same thing, and then about an hour later, the rest
You
of
listen to
America
Pete
says,
Williams
"Wait a
and
second."
find out what it really said.
Yeah, now that
this
I've
is
read
part
it,
of the
that's
problem.
completely opposite. Yeah,
But
it doesn't matter 'cause
At the
it's
same
out there.
time, it also stems from the fact that when Barr was confirmed, the media didn't cover enough how partisan he is, his Iran-Contra history. And it's the same with the Kavanaugh thing.
yeah.
When you have people who are deliberate partisans and you try to play they say he's partisan, but the other side says he's not, so it evens out, therefore, everything's neutral. That's what you get. That's the kind of lousy coverage you get.
Yeah.
Barr was appointed in order to do this. So then he does this. And the media says, oh, my goodness, we'll just have to take his word for it because he's such a respected establishment figure.
Yeah, you can tell is that he's been confirmed and has a suit. And
Yes,
remember when we
over
said
the
he was
past-
fair?
but that's our default. We have to treat people like that. Now, it's true that over the past couple of weeks since the release of that report, his reputation is in the crapper. But, the first impressions are out there. Yeah. Now, luckily, it doesn't matter as much as the White House thinks it does, the too clever by half, because actually there's a lot of people that haven't been paying any attention at all. And they don't watch Game of Thrones. And they don't watch this. And they don't know what Barr said. And they don't know what the Mueller report says.
That's true, although
they'd like to. 80% of the public would like to see it. Yeah. But, there's none of us have. So that actually makes it a bigger story when it does come out. So we'll see.
I think so. You would like to think so. I'm curious about whether we don't have to wait that long to see what happens, but I have,
we get to see it this
got
week.
a bad feeling about how people who haven't been paying attention, but who now decide it's time to pay attention, will find, I should Google some of this. Oh, look at that. No collusion exonerated. Okay.
Well,
we'll see.
All right. So let me give you an idea of the people who don't really think about politics too much.
Okay.
All right. This is a completely different story and a completely different subject, but it'll give you a feel for it. This is from Axios, and it's a Bowling Green, Ohio. Wasn't the massacre there? So
no, they're really still reeling.
Yeah, exactly. This is a focus group on swing voters.
It's too soon, but go on.
Guess who swing voters want to be president?
Probably a bowler. I'm not sure. Who?
It's Bowling Green, right? Obama.
Oh, he's done.
Ohio voters who have flipped between parties in past presidential election and supported Donald Trump in 2016 now say their first choice in 2020 is Barack Obama.
Huh. Does that mean they'll be Biden voters as,
Maybe,
well, he was the other guy?
But listen to what they're thinking. And again, it goes to, I'm not paying attention to any of this. Why it matters. Obama isn't running, and none of the 18 Democrats actually running have broken through in rural Ohio as the antidote to President Trump. The biggest takeaway from an Engagious Focus Point Global Focus Group. I don't know where they come up with these names.
Sorry.
This is the Optimatial.
We just had the other one from England.
Focus group. I watched last week. The group included 12 swing voters, half of whom voted for Mitt Romney in 2012 and then flipped to Hillary Clinton in 2016. Right? You already know they're confused.
Yeah.
And then half of whom went for Obama in 2012 and Trump in 2016. Right?
Yes.
I think this country needs a sense of calmness.
Sure.
I like Obama because he's more diplomatic and he's more intellectual.
Good.
All right? So, the point is there that they just want all of this to go away and just let's have a little bit less drama.
I can see that. It's not
That's why
realistic,
they're not paying
but you're right. Okay. Well, I just wish it would all go away. Well, for 2 minutes it will. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. Except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show. I'm changing the brand name just slightly.
That's Kagro, by the way. You've been pronouncing it wrong all these years.
I got it all. I've had it all wrong. I will now brand myself with something that sounds like a typo. We talked during the break about the crazy names that these polling outfits have given to themselves. I'm definitely dead set against Opinium. Any brand name that people will initially mistake for a typo is probably an error on your part, but that's just free branding advice for me. What do I know about branding? Am I the president of the United States? No.
Right. We could do a political consulting firm, right? We could call it Optimality Consentium.
Yes. Right. Just change one letter or put an X in there somewhere, I think.
Somewhere. Anyway, from this Axios story we were doing before the break, all but 2 of the participants said their 2016 vote was a vote against the other candidate, not for the person they supported. I wanted something new and different to shake up in a more positive way. Frederick W., a 23-year-old who went for Trump in 2016, said, I didn't want Clinton. I like Trump more because he's real. We know what we were getting into when we voted for him.
No, we didn't.
Okay, then I blame you, Frederick W., because you knew.
Yeah. That's a terrible excuse. You should
When
at
the
least say
swing
we
voters
didn't
were
have.
asked if there were anybody not running that they wish would run, Obama was the only name that came up. Meaning, that's the only other person I can think of.
Right.
I don't know of anybody else.
Sure, I guess
Well,
so.
what about Nancy Pelosi? Well, who's that? What about Chuck
Oh.
Schumer? Never heard of him. What
Maybe,
about Mitch
or else-
McConnell? What's a Mitch McConnell? You know. So, yeah, okay, fine.
Huh. Well, yeah, so not much in the way of names or, understanding that they can't be elected, but okay. Well,
Right, and that you read stuff. Lynn Saviel, a retired librarian. That's librarian, not libertarian. I always have to read that twice when I see that word.
librarium.
Who voted
her
Republican
company.
for 45 years until she went for Clinton, said Trump's been much worse than I thought. She's looking for a candidate with a strong personality, but somebody who has high ideals, not a person that lies like Trump. Even if it's something I don't want to hear, I want them to be really honest. And then when she gets that candidate, she won't vote for them.
I guess. I mean, the newspapers were full of stories about how many times he lied during the campaign. Everyone was watching that. But,
Right, but the bottom line, this story says, these Ohio swing voters are craving normalcy. And they're defining that by who they already know, Obama. That shows how far the crop of 2020 Democrats have to go before any of them can take his place. I don't know that shows that, but that's interesting nonetheless. And they link that to an earlier story about Wisconsin swing voters tiring of Trump. But again, in elections, when it's a binary and it's this person versus that person, it's not unusual at all to make it about the other person. That's what Trump successfully did when he ran against Clinton.
Yeah.
There were people who just didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. We know that in the
so.
primaries. We know that in the general election.
Yeah.
And even though Trump was terrible, maybe he isn't that terrible. See, he doesn't have that now. Everybody knows, he is that terrible and worse. And again, that's where the Mueller report comes into this. So there's a solid group of people, 46, 47%, who will not vote for Donald Trump. The only way he's going to be able to win is to demonize the other person. That's why he's going after Ilhan Omar. He wants to make the Democratic Party the party of socialists and Muslims.
Okay.
That's his goal. I mean, it's pretty transparent, and, it just annoys me when people play along with that.
I guess.
Why don't you defend Omar more? Why don't you be really vigorous? It's important, but it's not the most important story of the day.
Oh, I see.
Focusing on it and making that the story is only helping Trump.
I usually hate that excuse.
You defended her. Why didn't you defend her more strongly? Why didn't you defend her today? You only defended her yesterday. What do you have to say about it? So what I have to say is the Mueller report is coming out. We have an economy to deal with, and we're worried about recession. And the unions are telling us, and there's a story about this, that they want us to focus on bread and butter issues. And I'm sorry, your parsing my defense of Ilhan Omar is not a bread and butter issue. What part of that are you having trouble understanding?
Well, if you're Ilhan Omar or someone who lives in her household, I can understand it. But that's a limited number.
Well, get the protection.
Yeah, but Ilhan Omar won't tell you to obsess over it either. I guess it would probably be her neighbors would maybe say that. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Although I am a little tired of we're being distracted from only because everybody uses that.
So
okay,
here's
I
Susan
agree,
Demas writing about Michigan
your thing is
today.
distraction. Yeah.
Similar theme here. Republicans have accepted Trump is terrible. They've decided Democrats are worse.
True, they do think that.
Back in the halcyon never Trump days of 2016, you'd see conservatives slamming the GOP presidential nominee daily, and they all called him out. And, of course, now it's, never mind.
It's either that or socialism.
She gives Lindsey Graham as a great example. And it's true that Trump's tax cuts for the rich and a slew of conservative judicial nominations, not just on the U.S. Supreme Court, but throughout the federal bench, have certainly warmed the hearts of many a Trump skeptic. And many Republicans seem to be enjoying the freedom to embrace bigotry out in the open, like the DeVos family-backed U.S. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi, who, while running last year against African-American Democrat Mike Espy, said she'd be on the front row if the supporter invited her to a public hanging.
Yes.
But there's still some Republicans squeamish with Trumpism for various reasons. No worries. Most of them, probably a greater percentage than 2016, will vote for him anyway. Why? Because Democrats are just much worse. These conservatives will somberly agree that Trump billing taxpayers for trips to Mar-a-Lago is corruption. But here's the thing. Have you heard of this Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? She's a socialist, man.
Yes. Right.
Right? Fox News has mentioned the first-time Congresswoman more than 3,000 times across
Seems a
42
lot.
days. 42
Wow.
days, 3,000 times.
Almost as much as
So,
WikiLeaks during the
yeah,
campaign.
if you don't know who she is, you should know now. Conservatives' Facebook walls are littered with stories about her, like crazy stalkers, how dumb she is, how radical she is, how Latina she is. Many of those guys, and let's face it, they're mostly guys, will also tell you she's hot.
Oh, boy.
Now, AOC and I don't talk regularly, Susan says, but I think I can safely say that she's not going to date you, any of you.
Yeah, well, she's busy.
And they found other targets. Now they've got Omar and Michigan's Rashida Tlaib, the other Muslim woman to make history joining the body.
And they're all
so not
hot.
not everybody's plugged into politics, she points out, but going after women of color is a tried and true scare tactic. And historically, Americans have been more frightened of the far left than the far right, despite the growth of extreme right terrorism. And there's also the argument that Trump may be awful and corrupt and bigoted,
Yes.
but Democrats who want to force your kids to use transgender bathrooms and give your hard-earned money away to illegal immigrants are worse. That's the culture war and identity politics flare-up waged by the Trump administration that enjoys vast power. And if that doesn't sufficiently horrify you because you're just not into politics, there's always the idea that Washington is a cesspool. So Trump is, he can't be that much worse than the rest. They're all crooks. How do I know this? I've been hearing it from centrist pundits for years. All you have to do is turn on David Brooks or Bret Stephens or even David Frum sometimes, and they'll tell you just how terrible, Democrats are. Now, the fact of the matter is, and I've said this for a long time, I just think it's idiotic to run as a democratic socialist. It's a stupid name. It doesn't bring anything to the table. All it does is bring out these stories, and they are distractions from what your actual policies are.
Maybe they
But that's
rebrand.
not my decision. They've already done it, and there you have it.
Democratic Socialatron. Try that.
Well, they tried running against now Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania on that,
Oh.
and the Democrats cleaned up in 2018. So it doesn't always work. But then again, not every place is Pennsylvania.
All right. Well, that's true.
And at the same time, again,
Yeah,
the
part.
split in the Democratic Party is between liberals 50% and moderate conservatives 50%. And a lot of the people who took the House in 2018, I don't know if you'd call them blue dogs, but certainly they're centrists, the Connor Lambs of the world, the Abigail Spanbergers who don't want to run on Medicare for all. That's not why they were elected. So when you have a big party and you have a big tent, you're going to have all sorts of different opinions, and getting fixated on this is the only one right way to do it, especially this early in a primary, is, I think, something to be avoided. So that's something we have to watch.
Okay.
I am skipping the Bernie Sanders Think Progress fight that happened over the weekend.
That
I
is
really
fine.
don't much
I mostly
care.
did. Yeah, I don't. I didn't initially get it because I wasn't tuned into the problem, and then I saw
I want
lots
to
of
acknowledge
tweets
that
about
it
it.
exists. Let's move
I
on and talk
read
about
it,
something
and
important.
yeah, I did not understand the significance. So,
It's refighting the 2016 primary is what it is.
well, I don't like that, but it didn't even strike me as reminiscent of that. It just okay. I don't get it. I really don't.
I don't get it either, and I'm happy not to get it. So anyway, that's my summary for today. I'll be back on Wednesday, but maybe we'll see something of the Mueller report between now and then. That's the
Maybe.
story. That's the elephant in the room. That's going to be, everybody wait. Whatever other story you read. By the way, there is one other thing,
Yes.
which I haven't been able to track down exactly.
Oh.
So the Congress, first the House and then the Senate, decided that what Saudi Arabia was doing wasn't the best idea in the world.
Okay.
Okay?
What,
So they
what were they doing?
passed a rebuke
Of what are we talking about?
of the Saudi Arabian-Yemen war.
Oh, Yemen. Okay. Yes.
Right? I think it was a War Powers Act thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my recollection is it passed Congress.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. I believe you're right. And
And
so
then
what? Is this a
Trump
question?
threatened to veto it.
Okay.
Has he?
I don't know.
Is there a time frame beyond which you can't anymore? And is that today? I mean, that's why I'm asking.
There is a time frame that you have for an outright veto, and it's 10, well, depending on how you count, business type days. They usually exclude holidays and Sundays because one true religion and all that. But yeah, after the 10 days pass, if he has not issued his veto message, then it becomes law. So there is a deadline.
Senate clears Yemen war powers resolution in rebuke to Trump. This was on March 13th, 2019.
Okay.
So the Senate voted Wednesday to curtail U.S. military support for a Saudi-led war in Yemen, which has created a humanitarian crisis in that country. A vote seen as a rebuke of President Donald Trump's Middle East policies. The vote was 54-46. With 7 Republicans voting with Democrats. The measure now goes to the House, and it's expected to be vetoed by Trump. So it got passed, as far as I know, and it hasn't been vetoed, as far as I know. And that was a while ago, and I don't know when the timeline runs.
Yes.
But, it's just something to pay attention to because I haven't heard anything about a veto. I expected a veto.
So you think that the House passed it as well? Is that what you're saying?
I think so.
Okay, well, I'll have to take a look and find the bill. And sometimes, I guess here's what could happen is, let's see, if it went to the Senate and then the House, I don't know why they would delay, but the 10 days runs from his receipt, from the presentment, and sometimes takes a while, and it's a process you can manipulate to enroll or engross the bill. Once you've passed it in both houses, that's when you essentially check it over for errors and then put it on parchment, and in one of those folders so that you can sign it.
And then you send it over by carrier pigeon.
Yes, right, exactly. So, but that's actually a process in itself, and it can be manipulated and it can be slowed down or sped up in order to play with the 10-day timeline. So,
this April 4th story from Vox says Congress passes historic resolution to end U.S. support for Saudi-led war in Yemen. Date April 4th, Congress has officially passed a resolution to end this, yada, yada. Trump has pledged to veto it. So it's at least April 3rd or April 4th. The story's written on April 4th, so the vote may have been April 3rd. And today, of course, is April 15th.
Well, let's see.
But as you say, there's, days in between that don't count.
Right. And depends on whether or not they've finished putting the damn thing on parchment and carried it over to him. There is a section on Congress.gov where you can check on the votes and the status of bills. There's a section on presented to the president.
Yeah.
And I don't see it among the 3 bills listed as having been presented to the president. So it may be that it is sitting there in engrossment waiting to be delivered.
The calligraphy takes that long?
It ordinarily does not, but I don't know. Unless it's been presented and it was, if it was presented not yesterday, but the day before yesterday, it could have been on the Congress.gov list until Friday, and then it was, presented, and the clock starts then. I don't know. Let's see. I'll have to. If I had the bill number, it would be a little easier, but I can maybe go by votes. You say April
3rd
was the
would have been
story.
April 4th was the story.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see. Where's the votes section? How come it's not up here at front?
Don't try this at home, kids.
No, don't do this at all.
This is non-professional radio
here. Ordinarily easier to find the votes for some reason.
All the stories are April 4th.
Okay.
I see it in The Guardian. I see it in Vox.
There we are. No, congressional
All right,
record.
SJ Resolution 54, 115th Congress. No, that's 2017-2018. Nope, can't find it just yet.
Okay, well, I could probably search by Yemen. That's not going to be in that many bills. Let's see. Directing the president to terminate the. Okay, so that's.
Would it be an SJ
There are several,
bill?
of course. If it started in the Senate, yes.
Yep.
There's an SJ Res 7. Let's see. Yeah, so pass Senate, pass. Okay, there we are. That must be the one. SJ Res 7 tracks as introduced, passed Senate, passed House, but not yet presented to the president. So let's find out why. I don't think it'll say why, but let's see. We'll take a look at the latest action.
Well, S.J. Res 7 is described as a recently House-passed bill which seems likely to pass in the Senate, but actually the Senate passed it first.
Yeah, so I mean, it may have been amended in the House. Is that?
Well, that's why I dump it in your lap and say, This is as far as I can go. I need an expert. It's really hard to follow this.
Yes. Okay, yeah. Passed by recorded vote April 4th, 11:47 a.m.
That must be the one. Passed House and Senate, President next, April 4th, 2019.
Motion
so it's S.J. Res 7.
Table,
At least we know which is the bill.
Yeah.
And now the question is to track what happened to it. So it's probably too early for him to run out his veto string, but I'm just putting it on the radar because that's something to watch for.
Yeah.
Everybody's forgotten about it. I just thought I should mention it was actually a big deal.
How interesting is that? And now normally I would think that if the House was the last one to act, that they would be in charge of engrossment, but perhaps it's the opposite. Maybe it goes back to the originating House and they engross it, and McConnell is just saying, don't engross it for a while and see what happens. And then as long as it's not presented to him, he doesn't have to veto it.
And, again, I have to point out, I'm not so smart. It was when I put the pundit roundup together, one of our respondents, Doctor Who, put out this story reminding us about it. So I'm reminding you because it's worth doing. The Yemen war is terrible. Saudi Arabia is responsible. The Congress said that we should stop supporting it. And Trump, of course, has business interests, so he's going to wind up vetoing it.
Yeah.
We think. All but certain, as everybody says. I'm just looking for it, and I haven't found it.
Yeah, well, the answer is it's lost in the system of engrossment and enrollment and presentation. So there you have it.
And finessmanship. Right,
yeah,
it's all in there.
Wow. Okay. I will
anyway,
explain that to my
put
best
that
of
on your
my ability.
radar, and we'll watch for it.
Sure.
Maybe Joan will have something more to say about it at some point. But that's me for today, and I'll be back on Wednesday, and we'll see what's happened between now and then. Maybe a presidential veto, maybe a Mueller report, maybe a presidential veto of the Mueller report. We'll see.
We rebrand Greg as Greg Dworkum instead.
Optimanius.
That'd be a great handle name for you. Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much, Greg. I appreciate it.
It sounds like something out of the Avengers, doesn't it?
Yes. And everybody watched that, right? Everyone now tweet about not having seen it, please.
Okay. Take care.
Okay. Thank you. You do the same. And now we have to go learn about engrossment. And it's not a huge CRS report, so I could actually probably read it to you and go over it with you. The engrossment, enrollment, and presentation of legislation. It's not a current report, though I'm sure it's been updated since then. I happen to have a March 2008 version of it on the desktop here because I just put it there. And the process will not have changed since then. So I might as well, we can go through it. If you've never heard of this, this makes for an interesting thing. Like if Congress passed it, WTF? Why isn't this done already? And the answer is stuff is complicated. And once again, there's more to it than they teach you in Schoolhouse Rock or even in civics class. Even advanced civics probably doesn't get to this. Those of you preparing for the AP U.S. government class exams can listen in. And this will not be on it because even they don't give a good goddamn about this, but it plays a role in things. Engrossment, enrollment, and presentation of legislation are components of the legislative process that attest to the accuracy of bill texts, confirm House and Senate action, and confirm delivery of the bills to the president for review. You know how I'm always saying, well, where's the paperwork on that? Prove to me that it was done. This is the process by which all of that happens in the Congress. The Congress takes care of business. It takes them a long time to do it, but they actually make sure the paperwork is done. And this is why I say things like check it, because if you don't do the work, stuff screws up. You get the wrong version of the bill. You can't prove that the thing was passed. Everybody just assumes House voted. That was the second one to go. So boom, it's law. Or they forget about the president's veto. Then they forget about how that process works. Engrossment is the first topic. When either house orders the third reading of a bill, and yeah, that's an annoying parliamentary function that you sometimes hear mentioned on C-SPAN or C-SPAN 2. Nobody really ever bothers to explain what it means because it doesn't do a great deal to change our understanding of how the process works. But okay, the third reading of the final reading. When either house orders the third reading of a bill, it simultaneously, automatically, orders the engrossment of the bill. Not automatically. It's read aloud along with what happened when you propose the third reading. Sometimes you dispense with it, whatever. But it's ordered engrossed. Engrossment is the final reprinting of the bill in the form upon which the chamber will vote final passage. This is the official version of it. It includes all the amendments and all the text that's been stricken from the main body of the bill by other amendments, et cetera, et cetera. So if you amend the bill along the way, this is the process by which all of that is reconciled into one document. House and Senate rules require that all bills, amendments, and joint resolutions passed in each chamber must be examined by the clerk of the House or secretary of the Senate as appropriate. Now that makes sense, right? You want to make sure that these people will check this stuff and make sure that they've got it right. Official engrossed copies are prepared by the staff of the office of the clerk of the House and the office of the secretary of the Senate. The clerk or secretary are required to attest to the accuracy of the engrossed text by signing the measures. And again, check for signatures, right? The House engrossed measures, including amendments to bills passed by the Senate, are printed on blue paper. Why would this matter? Normally, this never enters into your life, but if you ever see the stuff or wonder why it matters, who did what and how do they differentiate and how can you tell? These are the mechanics of it. House engrossed measures, including amendments to bills passed by the Senate, are printed on blue paper. The Senate prints its engrossed measures on white paper. If either chamber later discovers errors in one of its engrossed measures, it may adopt a resolution formally requesting the other chamber to return the engrossed bill. The papers, again, have to actually physically pass, right? Return the engrossed bill or resolution to it for correction. An engrossed bill is messaged, that's in scare quotes, that's what they call it, the term of art. An engrossed bill is messaged by the originating house to the other. The second chamber to act attaches the text of whatever amendments it adopts to the original measure it has received from the first. So in our case here, the engrossed Senate SJ Res 7 is messaged to the House. The House acts, and if it adopted any amendments, and I don't think that it did, although I guess we should look over at the actions thing here on the House. Any amendments? Nothing that I can see, although maybe the House Rules Committee might have incorporated some in under its rule. I can't really tell, but it doesn't look like it's supposed to be going back to the Senate. Anyway, back to the question of the process. All right, so an engrossed bill is messaged by the originating house to the other. The second chamber to act attaches whatever amendments it adopts to the original measure it has received from the first. Then enrollment is next, when everybody has passed the thing. Everyone agrees on the version and has agreed that it has passed. An enrolled bill is the final version of a measure agreed to by both chambers, printed on parchment or paper. I think I mistagged that as engrossment rather than enrollment. Enrolled measures in the Senate are examined under the supervision of the Secretary of the Senate to see that the same are correctly enrolled. In the House, the clerk, in cooperation with the Senate, examines all bills and joint resolutions that have passed both houses to see that they are correctly enrolled. House enrolled bills are also certified by the clerk as having originated in the House. Enrolled bills are then signed by presiding officers of both chambers, with the Speaker typically signing the measure first. In the House, The Speaker may sign enrolled measures at any time. Any time. I think you need to be aware of that. I don't think that's what's happening here, but there you've got it. A formally designated Speaker pro tempore, appointed with the approval of the House, may sign enrolled bills in the Speaker's absence. The presiding officer of the Senate is authorized to sign enrolled measures when the Senate is in session. Okay, and that's, I guess, why. It's not so much, they didn't add that the Speaker can sign an enrolled bill at any time to designate that they can take their sweet time with it, and if for some reason it's in their interest politically to wait to send the bill, they can wait forever, but rather that the House permits the Speaker or Speaker pro tem to sign enrolled bills whether the House is in session or not, whereas the Senate requires that the Senate be in session when the presiding officer signs the enrolled measure, though they may similarly have flexibility in terms of deadlines. When a new Congress convenes, the Senate typically adopts by unanimous consent an order authorizing the President of the Senate, the President pro tempore, or any senator appointed by the President pro tempore to sign duly enrolled bills and joint resolutions during recesses and adjournments for the duration of that Congress. Okay, so the Senate rules typically is, the standing rules say you can only sign it when it's in session, but then usually at the beginning of a new Congress, the Senate adopts a unanimous consent order authorizing signatures even when the Senate is not in session. But it's not part of the standing rules. Both houses must adopt a concurrent resolution to recall an incorrectly enrolled bill already sent to the President, or to make changes in the text of an enrolled bill still in the possession of Congress. When the officials from both chambers have signed an enrolled bill, the measure is sent by the clerk or secretary, as determined by the chamber from which the bill originated, to the President for his consideration. That answers my question. The Senate is the one that has to dispatch this thing to the White House for signature, and it may be that Mitch McConnell is just taking his sweet time with it because he knows it's going to embarrass the President. With the general exception of an expiration of a Congress, there is no specific deadline within which Congress must submit an enrolled bill to the President. Preparing and signing enrolled bills may take significant time, and I guess this one is. We'll return to this after 1 minute. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. This is the most Kagro in the Morning Show ever, as we are reading the CRS report on engrossment, enrollment, and presentation of bills from Congress. This actually answers Greg's question as to where the F, WTF is. That's the where the F, not was, or you could ask WTF happened to that Yemen bill. So let's see, we were just pointing out for everybody, the chamber in which the bill originates is the chamber with the responsibility for enrolling the bill and presenting it to the President. Everybody has a job to do in enrolling. You all check to make sure everything is properly written and typed out in both houses. But in this case, a Senate joint resolution. So therefore, the Senate has the job of presenting it to the White House. Upon presentment starts the 10-day constitutional clock, during which time the President has the option of issuing a veto message, or if at the end of the 10 days, however measured, usually accepting Sundays and holidays, if there's no veto message issued, the bill is deemed, not signed, but it becomes law without the President's signature. That you might remember. That they'll teach you, generally speaking, on 1 day, in 1 minute and 1 day in your civics class. Whether or not you remember it is a different question. So, at any rate, if you have a Yemen measure like this, that there's nothing I can do about it. I'm Mitch McConnell. I want to lick the President's boots for some reason on this issue. The bill is embarrassing, and he doesn't know what to do with it. And the best we can do, I think, I guess I don't know what happens if the guy just never presents anything. You'd think that would be problematic. But again, that might be the sort of thing that no one ever contemplated, because of course public servants wouldn't be able to countenance doing such a thing. So therefore there's no deadline and no mechanism for what to do if the Senate Majority Leader instructs the President pro tem not to present the document at all. But more likely they would just say, well, let's wait for a convenient time in the news cycle wherein we think we can minimize the news impact of the Yemen bill becoming law. So the the chamber that originates the bill gets to present it to the president. And again, with the general exception of an expiration of a Congress, that is at the end of its 2-year terms, there is no specific deadline within which Congress must submit an enrolled bill to the president. Preparing and signing enrolled bills may take significant time, especially at the end of a Congress when many such bills must be prepared. That's not what's going on now, but I guess the most relevant part of that is there isn't a deadline. Mitch McConnell, I guess technically, why not? Why not push the boundaries? They did it, they pushed every boundary with Merrick Garland, right? Why not just say, what if I don't deliver this thing? The president isn't going to protest. The House could protest, but I don't care about the House. The Senate could protest. My own senators who voted for the thing, who were in my conference, could protest. And then I guess the question is, how much damage do I think it does to me politically to not deliver the resolution at all? Do I think it endangers my standing as majority leader? Do I think it endangers Republicans facing re-election? If the answer to both of those things is no, then I guess I just continue not to deliver the thing. And again, I guess technically it's not in the majority leader's hands. It would be the president of the Senate, and you know who that is. That'd be Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. He doesn't care about anything. President pro tem, who I forget who that even is now, but a Republican. I forget which idiot they gave this to. So I guess that's an answer. What if they just never send the thing over? Finally, there's the presentation section, which itself isn't all that long. Let's read that too, because why not get a complete education? The Constitution provides that every bill which shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate every bill which shall have passed the House and the Senate shall, again, before it become a law, be presented to the President of the United States. Enrolled bills are delivered to the White House by the clerk of the House or Secretary of the Senate as determined by the chamber in which the measure originated, and stamped to certify the date and time of their arrival. Paperwork matters. The clerk and secretary are also required to report the fact and date of presentation to the president to their respective chambers. When the president has been away from Washington, D.C. for long periods of time, Congress has sometimes agreed to present enrolled measures to him on his return. At other times, bills have been sent to him. So, for instance, if he were to go to Mar-a-Lago for 6 months, they could decide that they will present the Yemen bill to him then when he comes back. Whereas if it is a, let's say, Terry Schiavo bill, they will fly it to him wherever he is. You remember that. If the president signs a bill during the 10-day period, excluding Sundays, provided in the Constitution for his review, it becomes law. If the president disapproves or vetoes a bill, he must return it to the originating chamber, the Senate here, with a message indicating his reasons for disapproval. If the president does not sign or return a bill during the 10 days, the bill becomes law, unless the Congress has adjourned during the 10 days, thereby making it impossible for the return of the bill. That would be a pocket veto. Some doubt, this is relatively new stuff here, some doubt exists about the president's power to pocket veto a bill during intra-session and intercession adjournments. Did you know that? Did you know that people had even tried that? Just like what do we call them? Recess appointments became a hot topic recently, and that presidents attempted until recently to make recess appointments during even brief weekend adjournments of the Congress. And then they kind of came back with a pretty sensible ruling that no, that's not what this was really supposed to be about. And after all, the House and Senate, the idea of there being recess appointments, for instance, or pocket vetoes for that matter, both depended on the fact that the Congress might be absent and that there would be no official person there designated to receive messages from the president. And if they can't receive the message, then that's what creates a situation that the Constitution, in which the Constitution contemplated allowing recess appointments. Well, I had to do this on an emergency basis because the Congress wasn't there to receive my appointment message and consider it in time, and we really needed this person in place. That made more sense back in the days when Congress could be out of session for months at a stretch. These days, not so much. And especially not the case since, one, they can be back in session within hours in some cases, or at least within the space of a day if necessary. And two, they very often designate officers there to receive those messages, so there's no question about their being received and the ability to call the House back if necessary. We saw that play out in the recess appointment arena, and it would likely play out. I don't think anybody has claimed a pocket veto in an intra-session adjournment in decades, possibly 100+ years. In 1974, the Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that a pocket veto was improper during an intra-session adjournment. I guess that's close to 100 years, 1974. I guess it was the last time somebody actually tried it. There's the answer. The last time it was successful may have been hundreds of years ago. Anyway, in 1974, they ruled a pocket veto was improper during an intra-session adjournment in which the House and Senate administrative officers had been authorized to receive presidential messages. There we go. That's the full import of that decision. If you've got people here to receive the messages, then no pocket vetoing. If they've adjourned sine die and there is no Congress per se at that moment, that'd be a different story. Then you can pocket veto. Many claim that Congress may also authorize its officers to receive messages, including vetoes, during an inter-session adjournment or after any inter-session adjournment. The courts have not ruled directly on this pocket veto-related issue. That is to say, even after sine die, there's still a clerk of the House. They can still receive it on behalf of Congress. That shouldn't mean that pocket vetoes are still possible. But I don't know who would reconsider. Who would be there to vote to override? Nobody if you've adjourned sine die. Anyway, nobody's tried that one. Any attempt by Congress to deprive the president of his right to be presented with measures. Ooh, this could be interesting. An attempt by Congress to deprive the president of his right to be presented with measures before they become law. All they're willing to say here is may be constitutionally suspect. And that's certainly accurate. I would say it's constitutionally suspect, but I don't know how it comes out. Especially if, even this is written as if the contemplation is that the president is dying to get his hands on this thing, but a member of the opposite party who runs the House that originated the measure could seek to hide it from the president so that he can't sign it and make it law. But what it doesn't even contemplate here is, what if the president is the one that doesn't want to see this thing? The Supreme Court ruled in 1983 the legislative veto. The Supreme Court in 1983 ruled the legislative veto to be unconstitutional for this reason. Okay, but that's sort of a different subject. The legislative veto. Subsequently, in 1998, the court declared, this is the one I'm more familiar with, declared that the procedures set up in the Line Item Veto Act also violated the presentment clause of the Constitution. And that's a slightly different issue. But this has no answer for the question of what if Mitch McConnell directs the president pro tem or the vice president acting as president of the Senate simply refuses to dispatch an enrolled bill to the White House and start the clock ticking? And the answer is nobody knows. How interesting. Is there I should look around, I guess, at this point. We could say we've spent enough time on this, but there might be a more recent version of this that would take into account some additional rulings from the Supreme Court that might have happened in the 10 years plus since the last since when we were read, the CRS report was written. I see that there are some broader legislative process CRS reports that are much more recent that mention the enrollment and engrossment procedures, but nothing specifically about them. So there you go. An in-depth civics lesson for you this morning, teaching you how bill mechanics, possession of the papers, and the actual nuts and bolts of the way legislation physically moves through Congress, and it still has to move physically, can make a difference in something extraordinarily important. The Congress has passed a war powers resolution limiting the ability of the president to support a war being waged without congressional approval, and they still can't do a damn thing. They still can't close this war out because somebody has decided to be slow in moving the papers, because it doesn't say anywhere what happens if you drag your feet. So add that to the Merrick Garland file, if you will. Constitutional hardball being played in probably the softest possible manner, and no one has said anything about it. Has anybody seen reporting about the fact that it's now, let's see, they did this on April 4th, and it's not that long since they did it. It's 11 days. One of the days would have at least been a Sunday, and presumably there was another Sunday in there somewhere, because there's only 7 days. So even if they had handed it over to him, he'd still have at least 2 days to go. And I guess, as I learned by glancing back at my Twitter messages, maybe the president could lean on Maine and Massachusetts. Bill tells me up in Maine and Massachusetts, it's Patriots Day today, April 15th. I always thought that was kind of smarmy to throw that on tax day, but and so therefore a state holiday, but I think there's a weird situation whereby federal offices in those states are closed too. I don't know. But Maine and Massachusetts don't have to pay taxes today. I guess they have until tomorrow because of the Patriots Day thing. And what if a president said, no, I still have another day to veto this thing because my heart is in Maine. Something like that. Maybe the Bushes could have claimed such a thing. Don't know if Donald Trump could get away with it. Anyway, I thought we'd point that out. I mean, this is a serious business, War Powers Act and all that. And even then, finally, after all these years, somebody's going to actually limit the president's power to support the waging of wars around the world. And even still, with all the difficulties involved of getting a Republican Senate to agree with a Democratic House to limit the powers of the president, how traitorous is Mitch McConnell to his own branch to be dragging his feet on this? And the answer is he doesn't care. Don't even answer how traitorous he is, because it won't make a difference to him. He's not interested in hearing about it. Okay. Wow. So let's see. As a matter of fact, that might be an interesting transition of sorts to a tweet thread provided to us yesterday, or beginning Saturday, by Garance Frank Ruta, which is the real name of an actual reporter, despite the sound of it. She's been tweeting, and how long does this run now? I mean, it's been this ever-expanding thing. We're on to 20-something tweets, then the responses. I guess it goes up through Sunday, the 14th. 24 tweets in this thread, beginning this way. Maybe someone should hold a hearing into all the different ways Trump has asked people who work for him or the government to break laws. Now, I'm not saying that Mitch McConnell is breaking laws. He's simply bending norms over in the Senate with any delay he might be engineering in the presentment of the Yemen resolution, but will expand the inquiry into boundary pushing by moving over to this thread. And so she has counted out 24 different instances. Here are some reported examples. Just makes for a good reminder for everybody. One, a quote from, from a New York Times piece here. Ms. Nielsen, I almost said Bridget Nielsen, Kirsten Nielsen, I guess now former, is she officially done as DHS secretary, or is there paperwork that still needs to move? Ms. Nielsen had earlier refused to carry through with Mr. Trump's desire to close the border, telling him it was illegal. She attaches Ron Brownstein's tweet with, I guess, the larger context here. Ms. Nielsen had earlier refused to carry through with Mr. Trump's desire to close the border, telling him it was illegal, but the president encouraged Mr. McClellan to disregard Ms. Nielsen and enforce the move himself. And that's just, I guess, the latest egregious example that caused Garance to begin compiling these stories. Number two here, based on a CNN report, and I guess what she's doing is quoting the most applicable line of it, so she saves us a lot of reading. Number two here, Trump told Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Kevin McClellan he would grant McClellan a pardon if he were sent to jail for having border agents block asylum seekers for entering the U.S. in defiance of U.S. law. The president spent, I believe, the White House and the president spent the weekend denying that he had ever done such a thing or said such a thing, or that if he had, it was a joke. So that's pretty fantastic not to be able to tell the difference. The third of Garance's tweets here asked whether he believes federal law requires him to give Congress his tax returns. President Donald Trump responded, "There's no law whatsoever." He's wrong about that. That, of course, from factcheck.org, and good thing, too, because I love that. There's no law that says that. There is one. You disagree with it, perhaps, but the fact that there is one just isn't true. Yes, it is. And so, therefore, 25% of America thinks, yes, it is. Number four here, EPA's failure to make the full studies available to the public is blatantly illegal and a slap in the face to the 2016 bipartisan reforms to TSCA that sought to increase public access to information on chemical risks. What is that all about? Well, if you want to know about that, you'll have to read the EDF's blog at blogs.edf.org. The Trump EPA's latest TSCA gift to the chemical industry is illegal, it says. Don't know what TCSA is, but do we need to know? We need only know that it is illegal. Next up, Interior's proposed FOIA limits may be illegal, watchdogs say. That's the headline on a Bloomberg environment report from who knows when. Let's see. I guess now that I've said it and I have to find out the date for you, I'll click through and find out. January 4th, 2019. All right. Next up, Michael Cohen, reports PBS. Michael Cohen was sentenced to 36 months in prison on Wednesday in part for brazen violations of the election laws, when he orchestrated hush money payments on behalf of President Donald Trump during the 2016 election. Oops. Next up, EPA violated law by keeping harmful pesticide on the market, court says. That was back in the Scott Pruitt days. Next, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, retired, quoted as saying, "There is no leader in the military who would allow a soldier to shoot at an individual throwing a rock. They know that violates the rules of engagement, the law of the land warfare." What? The law of land warfare. I see. Okay. My goodness. That the Axios report from back in the days when they had to report on President Trump's insistence that they should basically be shooting migrants who are unruly or basically are migrants. That from a few months ago. Taking migrant children from parents is illegal. The UN tells the U.S. Well, everybody knows that doesn't matter. That gleaned from the New York Times report titled precisely the same. Next up, an ACLU report quoted as saying Trump's emergency declaration is illegal. Trump himself admitted that there is no emergency when he said, "I didn't need to do this." That was kind of funny. And it's next up she says, well, that's just for starters. Feel free to send other examples and I'll tweet them out. And I guess that has happened because there's a few more. I guess the thread got interrupted, and so she's pointing us to the ones that we will have missed. Trump's plan to have the military build a wall is illegal, as reported by justsecurity.org. Washington Post's report here reads in the next tweet, Tillerson said Trump is pretty undisciplined, doesn't like to read, and repeatedly attempted to do illegal things. This is the Tillerson exit interview, I guess, months later. I would have to say to him, Mr. President, I understand what you want to do, but you can't do it that way. It violates the law. Whoops. Well, I guess it happens a lot. Let's see. Then there's number 13 on the list. The president told border agents not to let migrants in. Agents sought further advice from their leaders, who told them if they did what the president said, they would take on personal liability. You have to follow the law, they were told. That, too, reported by CNN. And let's see, jumping back in at number 14. If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, this is in the LA Times. I guess this is actually at one of the rallies. If you not rocks at the border, but tomatoes at rallies. If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato or any other vegetation, let's say meat products, perfectly permissible. Knock the crap out of them, would you? Trump said, drawing cheers and laughter. Seriously, okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay the legal fees. I promise. That may have been the campaign. One of those rallies. I'm pretty sure that it was. Number 15, strategy of taking oil in Iraq would amount to a war crime, experts say. Trump's frequent invocation of the spoils of war seems to hark back to a bygone age of conquistadors and plunder-based imperialism, illegal now under the laws of war, thanks to the reporting of The Guardian on that one. Then, gleaned from MSNBC, Trump reportedly told tribal leaders to ignore federal laws and extract whatever they want from the land they control. Mineral rights being the question at hand there. I remember that one. Number 17, NBC News is reporting, the law has been a major limitation for Trump, who wants to engage troops in his mission to get tougher on immigration. The Posse Comitatus Act prohibits the use of federal troops for domestic law enforcement inside the U.S. We all remember that one. Next up, she says, and then there's all the DOJ rulings making things heretofore seen as barred by the Constitution and the law suddenly permissible. The flip side, such as, and this one had been waiting in the wings for us to read. Maybe that makes a nice next stop one of these days. DOJ has adopted a narrow interpretation of a law meant to bar foreign interests from corrupting federal officials. Did you know that we actually had an additional law on that besides the constitutional prohibition? And it's been undone. The DOJ has adopted a narrow interpretation of a law meant to bar foreign interests from corrupting federal officials, giving Saudi Arabia, China, and other countries leeway to curry favor with Donald Trump via deals. This is a Guardian piece that's actually been in pocket and I considered for including last Friday and never got to it. Trump hotels exempted from ban on foreign payments under new stance. We may have to examine that one. And I guess perhaps today. Number 19 out of the 24 here. Still going. In a reversal of legal advice given to prior presidents, the Justice Department has concluded that it is lawful for Donald Trump to appoint his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to a White House post, and that federal anti-nepotism laws do not cover the White House, even though they were kind of designed because of what happened at the White House. That report, according to Politico. Let's fit in another couple of them here. Number 20, the Justice Department's pushed back on Wednesday against accusations that President Trump's appointment of, remember this one, Matthew G. Whitaker as acting attorney general was illegal. We never really did see the paperwork on that one. Number 21 will fit. I think the Trump administration officials have privately considered the possibility of allowing law enforcement access to census information, which would be a clear violation of federal law. But let's maybe consider giving it anyway. That one according to the Brennan Center's report. Number 22, Garant says, and that's not even including all the regulatory rollbacks that are being challenged as violating laws. Number 22 reads, federal judges have ruled against the Trump administration at least 63 times over the past 2 years, an extraordinary record of legal defeat, and the origin of my "you're really good at getting stuff done" or whatever hashtag Dotard tweets as well. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Has recently become the Garance Frank Ruta show, apparently, but we're getting close to the end of her thread. But it's impressively long, the number of instances in which Trump has demanded or asked his staff or people working for him to violate the law to get things done. And sometimes they get done, but generally speaking, they do not. But just how frequently he appears comfortable with disregarding the law. Disconcerting, I think, to everyone. Let's see. We last left off. Oh, there's this continuation of number 22 here. The move into regulatory rollbacks being challenged as violating laws, and many of them have made appearances in our "you are really good at getting stuff done" or whatever hashtag Dotard Twitter thread that I maintain. Once again, federal judges have ruled against the Trump administration in at least 63 times over the past 2 years, an extraordinary record of legal defeat. And this continues in the next tweet, reading, 2/3 of the cases accuse the Trump administration of violating the Administrative Procedure Act, or APA, a nearly 73-year-old law that forms the primary bulwark against arbitrary rule. And I don't know if that fully hits you exactly what they're saying here. It may be that the fact that it's a 73-year-old law turns people off to it like, oh, some dusty old document that has nothing to do with modern day life at all. And the answer, or the reason it's become a dusty old law, is because it's so basic to the way we do business as a democracy that no one Not that no one dares violate it. People violate it all the time. It's just a pretty dry subject because it's usually technical violations, which administrations, though they may fight them in order to try and get their policies enacted, eventually all come into compliance with. Because as they say here, the second phrase in the sentence is the most important. It forms the primary bulwark against arbitrary rule. And again, we'll just harken back to one or two of our previous old days shows by mentioning that the inclusion of the word arbitrary here is not arbitrary. It's a direct reference to the language of the law and the language of the jurisprudence we've referred to here, reminding everybody that things can't be arbitrary and capricious. That's administrative law terms of art that come up time and again, especially when you have a president whose greatest hallmark is his resort to things arbitrary and capricious. Caprice not widely enough appreciated in the way it describes how this presidency seems to work. The normal win rate, to continue with number 22 here, the normal win rate for the government in such cases is about 70%. In other words, all of these 63 cases that they've lost here, normally the government is able to defend what it does because it takes at least some care in making its decisions and has the mental capacity to proceed carefully enough that even though there may be a question about whether or not the action was arbitrary and or capricious, they can establish a chain of events that shows, no, it wasn't done arbitrarily. There was a reason, and it's got some basis in reality, and here it is. And it wasn't capricious. We've been studying this for a long time. It wasn't something the president tweeted, and we did because we were afraid to be fired if we didn't, even though we knew it was illegal. This is a dramatic change, a dramatic departure from the way the government has done business in all the times past. And I know that's supposedly what Trump's fans love about him, but it doesn't actually get anything done. So, as they say, the normal win rate, because other administrations are careful, is about 70%. Trump's win rate in cases like this, about 6%. So I think he's running a little bit behind. That would be data that tends to prove that the vast majority of what Donald Trump does or orders his administration to do on his behalf is arbitrary or capricious. Anyway, wait, there's more, says Garance. Number 23 here. After the first version of the executive order was blocked by the courts, Trump signed another version that was intended not to snag on legal hurdles. I think we ought to go back to the first one and go all the way, he said. In other words, and it doesn't even matter which one this is, but as it happens, you've probably guessed it's the Muslim travel ban. But once again, after the first version was blocked by the courts, another one was given to him that was intended not to have the same problems, and he signed it, but his comment was, well, I think we should do the first one anyway, and just go all the way, even though it was illegal. That based on Politico's reporting as well. Number 24, which I think is the last entry here, also a Politico story. White House aides realized early on that they were unable to stop Trump from ripping up paper after he was done with it and throwing it in the trash or on the floor, or in some cases eating it, as it turns out. They chose to clean it up in order to make sure that the president wasn't violating the law. Everyone remember this one? The Presidential Records Act. You're not allowed to just tear up whatever you want or throw away your documents when you're done with them. They're supposed to go in the archives. Trump doesn't care, and he doesn't think history is interesting or fun, so screw all that crap. And by the way, it's illegal, Mr. President. Oh, well, that's okay. No one has ever successfully prosecuted me for anything anyway, so there's no such thing as law. Goodbye. I feel like tearing stuff up. That's what I'm going to do. So there you have it. It's been pretty interesting. And that's probably not even an well, it was exhausting to read the list, but not exhaustive and comprehensive, but that's a pretty good start. And I challenge you, if you've got more, by all means, share them. Well, let's say share them with Garance, because I'm tired. I've read a lot from that. And that leads me back, just to loop back to the Guardian piece, because I said I would do it. And it was of interest at the time that it went to publication, and we just haven't fit it in yet. Guardian, reported by Peter Stone in Washington on April 9th, Trump hotels exempted from ban on foreign payments under new stance. The long story short subheader, a narrow Justice Department interpretation of the emoluments clause, yes, gives countries leeway to curry favor with the president via commercial deals. The tweet we read made it sound like there was an additional law, a statute outside of constitutional prohibitions, and I guess there really isn't. which makes it all the more alarming, really, that this is their interpretation of the Constitutional Emoluments Clause. Add this on top of the utter ridiculousness of the General Services Administration just simply ruling for no apparent reason, arbitrarily, capriciously, one might even argue, that this doesn't violate anything. Because if it did, well, this would all be super illegal and unconstitutional, and I guess at the end of the day, we have to figure out whether Trump is the president or not, and I don't know how we would do that, so therefore, the more convenient answer is, well, this must not be in a violation of the Emoluments Clause, or else somebody would have said something. Is essentially what it comes down to. So let's see. Department of Justice has adopted a narrow interpretation of a law, not a law, unless they explain it further, meant to bar foreign interests from corrupting federal officials, giving Saudi Arabia, China, and other countries leeway to curry favor with Donald Trump via deals with his hotels, condos, trademarks, and golf courses, legal and national security experts say. The so-called Foreign Emoluments Clause was intended to curb presidents and other governmental officials from accepting gifts and benefits from foreign governments unless Congress consents. That is not a law. That is a provision of the Constitution. I don't know whether Peter Stone is American or British and therefore doesn't understand, or just American and had a bad civics education, or if there's some other nuance I'm missing, but it's not an interpretation of a law. It's an interpretation of the Constitution, which really, honestly, I don't know what to tell you. That's not what the DOJ ought to be doing. But okay, they're doing it. In a forthcoming article in the Indiana Law Journal, the Washington University law professor Kathleen Clark reveals Justice Department filings have recently changed tack. The new interpretation, Clark says, is contained in justice filings responding to recent lawsuits lodged by attorneys general and members of Congress. Clark's article notes that in more than 50 legal opinions over some 150 years, Justice Department lawyers have interpreted the clause in a way that barred any foreign payments or gifts except for ones Congress approved. But filings by the department since June 2017 reveal a new interpretation that, quote, would permit the president and all federal officials to accept unlimited amounts of money from foreign governments as long as the money comes through commercial transactions with an entity owned by the federal official, the professor writes. That seems like more than a minor shift, don't you think? Because it's now all federal officials. So all you got to do is you just have to start a business that and retain ownership of it and say, I'm going to open a mailboxes, etc. franchise wherever. It doesn't have to be in Washington, D.C. It could be in your own district. And I'm going to let the Saudis know that if they rent all the mailboxes there in perpetuity, I will help them out with XYZ issue. Or, for instance, let's say, I don't know, just to add some spice to this one, Mitch McConnell starts a mailboxes, etc. Or Mitch McConnell's wife runs a shipping company, let's say. And if the Chinese or the Saudis or all of them, Russians, Yemenis for that matter, they're allowed to do this. I don't know if they would want to take up the opportunity to do it. The good people of Burkina Faso, for instance, could rent all the mailboxes or ship everything with my wife's company, and then I would do them legislative favors. Or to bring it back to Yemen, if the Yemenis, or rather the Saudis, I guess, would be interested in doing this, were to ship all of their oil from now on with Elaine Chao Lines Incorporated, I would, let's say somebody had handed me an enrolled bill invoking the War Powers Act to limit or eliminate, rollback American cooperation in the war in Yemen. And I would say, forget that I had it in my briefcase for 11 years. Then that would now be okay. So that sounds like a great interpretation of things over at the Justice Department. And they should just be the department, because justice is just not interesting to them anymore, I guess. So how about that? That's pretty amazing. The Justice Department's stance now closely parallels arguments made in a January 2017 position paper by Trump Organization lawyer Sherry Dillon, of all of his lawyers, among the most corrupt. And I think that probably just had, I think Armando just fell down the stairs listening to that. Can you imagine that? The Justice Department has revised 150 years of its stances on the emoluments clause because Sherry Dillon is crazy and she says it wouldn't be an emolument, and that's totally wrong unless everybody just agrees that it's totally right. This is a different approach from getting 5 justices to just say everything you understood about federal law and civics and all that has now stood on its head. We can start by saying, what if the Justice Department itself just decides to become of the opinion that there's no such thing as emoluments as long as it's funneled through a business? Why would you do that? I don't know. Sherry Dillon said it, and she's an idiot, but, to save her and the president, I guess, embarrassment, why don't we just say that stupid backwards interpretation is the new one? Okay, so they did. On 11 January 2017, just days before he was sworn in, Dillon said Trump, this would be days before Trump was sworn in, Dillon said Trump isn't accepting any payments in his official capacity as president, as the income is only related to his private business. Paying for a hotel room is not a gift or a present. It has nothing to do with an office, Dillon said. That goes against what many experts believe. That's nicely said. Very politely put in The Guardian. For over 100 years, the Justice Department has strictly interpreted the Constitution's anti-corruption emoluments clause to prohibit federal officials from accepting anything of value from foreign governments absent congressional consent, Clark told The Guardian. In 2017, the department reversed course, adopting arguments nearly identical to those being put forward by Trump's private sector lawyers. Instead of defending the republic against foreign influence, the department is defending Trump's ability to receive money from foreign governments, Clark added. She is right. A Justice Department spokesperson declined to comment, but pointed to its filings in the emoluments lawsuits, which Clark has noted contained 5 arguments similar to those used by Trump's business lawyers. Among the key justice arguments is that the foreign emoluments clause only was intended to prohibit the president accepting gifts and employment compensation from a foreign government, but allows him to benefit from what it calls commercial transactions. Other legal scholars also voice strong qualms about the Justice Department's current position on emoluments and criticize the administration's lax attitude and about conflicts involving Trump and his business empire. The heart of the matter is that these are clauses meant to guard against undue foreign influence and conflicts of interest. John McHale, a professor at Georgetown Law Center, said. Two attorneys general from the District of Columbia and Maryland have filed suits arguing the Trump International Hotel in Washington, where numerous foreign and state delegations have stayed or hosted events, has violated the anti-corruption clauses. Some 200 members of Congress have also filed suit alleging that Trump has conflicts of interest in at least 25 countries. The Inspector General at the General Services Administration, which oversees the government-owned old post office building leased by Trump International Hotel, has faulted the agency for improperly ignoring the emoluments clauses and for conflicts of interest involving the hotel while Trump is in office. We've discussed before that the lease specifically prohibits Trump's ownership of the thing, but they've just ignored it because fixing it is too hard. Former intelligence officials also expressed concerns. There's a perception among lobbyists for foreign governments that the White House is for sale, said Robert Baer, a 21-year CIA veteran with a Middle East background. It's a counterintelligence nightmare. The Trump Organization did pledge that while Trump was president, it would donate any profits from foreign entities to the Treasury. To that end, it has, supposedly, written checks for $342,000 to the government covering the years 2017 and 2018, but some ethics watchdogs have questioned the methodology for calculating these payments, arguing it doesn't account for foreign revenues to Trump businesses, which overall have had yearly losses. Further, critics note that while Trump opted to let his two sons run his real estate business and pledged he would not be involved with it as long as he was president, he has not been shy about publicly touting his properties, including his Scottish golf course. A chief focus of critics and the emoluments lawsuits has been the Trump International Hotel, which has become a mini Mecca. Oh, that's interesting to choose, given who's using it. A mini Mecca for numerous foreign delegations, including ones from Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Turkey, and the Philippines, who have used it for overnight stays and various meetings. The hotel is leased from the GSA for 60 years and located on Pennsylvania Avenue, just a few blocks from the White House. The IG's report this January said the lease should have been reviewed again with Trump's election to determine if it was in violation of the emoluments clause. It is. It's pretty obvious. Critics of Trump's ongoing ties to the Trump International and his business empire also note that some countries with major political and business problems in Washington have frequented his properties. It appears that President Trump may be benefiting from foreign use of his properties designed to influence his decisions, said the former Republican Congressman Mickey Edwards, who has had a tremendous career post-Congress criticizing Republican positions, but largely having been ignored in doing so, I would note for the record. For instance, a 60-person Malaysian government delegation stayed at Trump International in the fall of 2017 at a time when the Justice Department was conducting a major corruption investigation of Malaysian officials, including the then Prime Minister Najib Razak, who had a White House meeting with Trump during their stay, as first reported by radio station WAMU and Reveal. Meanwhile, lobbyists for Saudi Arabia, which has aggressively courted Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, spent at least $270,000 at his D.C. hotel after Trump won the election, booking 500 rooms over an estimated 3-month period, according to a Washington Post report. Last March, a Saudi delegation traveling with the country's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman seemed to enjoy a lavish stay at Trump's New York hotel, which helped to reverse a 2-year revenue decline at the property, according to the Washington Post. These foreign dealings with Trump hotels are Exhibit A for many critics of the weak-kneed enforcement of the emoluments clause in the Trump era. The administration gives off every appearance of turning the White House into a giant cash register, said McHale. Rather than drawing bright lines between the Trump organization and the Trump administration, they seem intent on blurring those lines. The lawsuits have to wend their way through the courts, which could see tough battles given mixed court rulings thus far, but critics in Congress and outside are raising more questions about emoluments and Trump's business conflicts as new issues keep arising. Congress now must conduct independent oversight so the American people can determine for themselves whether the president is acting in our nation's best interests or his own, said Congressman Elijah Cummings, the chairman of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. Have they had hearings on the hotel and the way it violates the emoluments clause? I don't know if they've had time to get to that. Mike Carpenter, who served on the National Security Council in the Obama years, added, "When foreign powers patronize the president's businesses, it creates an enormous national security risk." And that is true. And we are done with the article except for this update. This article was amended on 10 April 2019. An earlier version said that the Trump organization had written checks for $342 million to the government when it should have been $342,000. Okay. I think we read the correct version. Pretty amazing, pretty inexplicable, and just lost in the haze, really. It could get lost in the haze of just a list of the ways the Trump administration has broken the law or encouraged others to break the law on their behalf. And that doesn't even get to the haze of other things that he's done wrong or improperly or inappropriately over the years. All right. Let's see. What else do we need to get to here? We made some mention of in the list of items that Garance put together. But in case you wanted more information on it, CNN's reporting by Jake Tapper, as a matter of fact. In this instance, Trump told CPB head he'd pardon him if he were sent to jail for violating immigration law. So, in case you wanted further in-depth documentation on that, I will include that in our roundup. Let's see. There's new news on the super corrupt inauguration period. This from the Palm Beach Post. And we always love picking up on the Floridian angle on these things. They're doing a great job down in the Miami Herald and now the Palm Beach Post in following the southernmost instances of corruption in this administration, all centered, of course, around Pervalago. Undisclosed cash flowed at Trump inaugural ball with ties to China and embattled Saipan Casino. All very interesting. Reported by Lulu Ramadan, which is not a combination of names I would have imagined I could get away with without a Matrix glitch, but that's the thing. That's the name here. Reported originally on April 12th, thousands of dollars in donations flowed to an undisclosed source at a Trump inaugural ball. This one down in Florida, not Washington, D.C. Hasn't gotten attention up to date, I don't think. An inaugural ball with links to China and dubious donors, but hey, no financial records and maybe a couple of massage parlors to boot. In the decked-out ballroom of a ritzy Washington... Oh, this did happen in Washington. Why is the Palm Beach Post the lead on this one? The decked-out ballroom of a ritzy Washington hotel the night before Donald Trump took office. Thousands of dollars flowed from political donors and a questionable casino company to an undisclosed bank account. Why would that be an issue? The lavish Asian Pacific American Presidential Inaugural Gala, the first of its kind, with a buffet-style dinner. It's the first of its kind, period, but it also had a buffet-style dinner. It's not that they've had several sit-down dinners in the past. You get it. Okay. First of its kind, buffet-style dinner, cocktail tables draped in white cloth, and live entertainment. The construction of this writing. The cocktail tables weren't draped with live entertainment. They just had tablecloths, which is what you put on tables. It doesn't really need to be included. But there was also live entertainment, which happens at a lot of galas. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, heart of the matter, I think, is down here. It drew more than 900 people who paid at least $75 per ticket and a handful of sponsors who shelled out much more. But there's no trace of the money raised that night, as required by law. The Palm Beach Post has found. That includes donations by their biggest listed sponsors, among them an embattled Saipan-based casino, later raided by the FBI. Wow. It's in Saipan? Did we raid it in Saipan? A Guam-based shipyard, and a handful of Pacific Island hotel operators, all of which benefited from a foreign labor bill signed into law by Trump a year later. Raising the political stakes further, one of the event's 4 chief organizers, one-time Trump campaign aide Jason Osborne, followed up the event by lobbying for the labor bill to help the Northern Mariana Islands, home to the Saipan Casino. That explains the FBI involvement. One man in charge of raising money for the event told the Post that the host, the National Committee of Asian American Republicans, collected between $5,000 and $15,000 each from up to 20 listed sponsors. It also took in hundreds of smaller contributions. At a registered political committee, such contributions must, by law, be reported to the Federal Election Commission, but none were. The committee's executive director, Boca Raton tech entrepreneur, Zhang Gang, or Cliff Lee, and this is an L-I, Lee, told the Post that he knows where the money went, but I don't want to tell you. This is like a comedy movie at this point. That almost sounds like an admission of reporting violations, said Aaron Chlopak, a former Federal Election Commission attorney. Political committees have to disclose all of their receipts and disbursements. There's no I don't want to exception. Lee has drawn international attention as an associate of, you'll never guess, Cindy Yang. Yes, the massage parlor lady, the one-time head of fundraising for the committee that hosted the gala. Her access to Trump through his Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach and involvement in groups linked to the Chinese Communist Party prompted top congressional Democrats to seek a federal investigation. But so far it hasn't gotten started yet. Boy, for a person who claims not to have been a member of Mar-a-Lago, Cindy Yang sure is connected there. And by the way, have we ever gotten an actual answer to that? Is it really going to take a congressional investigation to find out the list of members of Mar-a-Lago? I'll just fit in a little bit more here. As the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York investigates allegations of financial abuse by the Trump Inaugural Committee, which raised a record $107 million, no public investigation has targeted the Asian American Republican Inaugural Ball, which has links to China and dubious donors, but no financial records. I guess the time is now for beginning that inquiry. It's amazing. We can be distracted by so many things in so many different directions. Yes, the Mueller report coming too, and we should be paying attention to that. Oh my goodness. How are we ever going to keep up? And the answer is, I guess tune in here. We'll do it for you. And if I can't get to it, Justice will on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Witness the following on today's program. Democrats need to quit giving the White House more time on Trump's taxes and start holding people like Steve Mnuchin in contempt. I agree. We've discussed it. In another move to establish his white nationalist credibility with the international community, Trump blocked the U.S. from nominating anyone to the UN Racism Committee. Trump has lost more cabinet members now than any president in over 25 years.
On netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
Well, he'll be taking a look at Mitch McConnell, too. Now, living in fear that he'll cross Trump and it'll cost him his re-election to the Senate. And after their break, they move on to this story. Trump's re-election campaign raised more than $30 million in the first quarter of 2019. And while Trump continues to defy the law in contesting the House Ways and Means Committee in demands for his taxes.